I'm gonna record again in case. Thank you so much, Jenna. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it back to Lori to introduce the next agenda item.
Great, thank you. So the next agenda item is a follow-up on the transition project. You'll remember that we got to talk about this 2 weeks ago, and hopefully you all saw the letter that Mike, Jordan, and Shoshana put together that explains our role and how we're to support the transition project. So this is a follow-up on that, and here to answer questions. You might want to clarify too, I think to Julia's point, we should be careful about all chiming in. So if you want folks to wait until the end or interrupt, but so I'd like to introduce Shoshana Oppenheim, our transition project manager, and Sonia Shemansky, the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you so much for having us here. I did prepare some slides, but I've kind of gotten to know you guys a little bit over the last couple of weeks, and I thought maybe more of a discussion would be more your style. Mike did send a letter to all of you clarifying the role of the GTAC and specific places where the GTAC could be involved in our work and help guide our work. So Sonia and I are here, and we're happy to have an open discussion. I could again run through some slides that basically restate what's in the letter that Mike sent to you, or we could just have more of a discussion about if there were any lingering questions from that letter, how we would actually see your engagement impacting our work. I already see that Zach has a question. So
I just want to make sure, is the letter posted online for people who are sitting in to be able to know what?
I don't know, but we're happy to post it after the meeting.
Yeah, or at least so that they can follow along with this meeting to give a very high level overview of what was in the letter. It also sounds like
I think Janice might have a copy that's, was that online that you got that?
That's my recollection.
Yeah.
is it already online?
Yeah, I
Did it,
Yeah.
it's may I ask, did it come through the Portland, the GTAC email?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I didn't get
If
it.
you look at the chat, Julie just posted the link to it. Look in the chat of the Zoom.
I'm looking at my emails.
So if you're
Go back
in
to
the
Zoom.
if you're in the meeting chat, it looks like it's also located there. But just
There we go. Thank you, Julia.
a lot of our conversation was really about how you could be engaged. And I know that was a big question following up from our conversation. And we really want to just highlight for you that you are the main public engagement effort for the transition. When we develop our community engagement plans, they will be through you. When we finalize our transition plan, it will be through you, and with your guidance and affirmation. We want to bring our change management strategies, which you're going to hear more about on the service delivery side tonight, through you. We want to use your expertise. We know that more brains are better in our work, and so that's what we're expecting to come and have conversation with you about some of those key components. If there are specific areas of our work that you're interested in, I imagine those are around our change management strategies, about how we're going to be engaging Portlanders. I heard a lot of expertise around voter education and voter experience in our first meeting with you. So we absolutely would bring our voter education plans to this group. So our plan is to come to you prior to key decisions, and hopefully the letter kind of gives you a little bit more insight into that. Sonia, anything you want to add to? Mike was pretty passionate about this when we talked to him, and wanted to make sure that we captured it in in detail when we wrote back to you. So
yeah, well, first, I'm really happy to be here and to meet all of you, and to see Zach again, and to thank you personally for serving in this body for the duration of the project. It's a big commitment. I'm Sonia Szymanski. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here for Mike tonight. And I salute you for getting my name exactly right. Thank you. And Shoshana's right. Mike was really, it was Mike's idea to put this letter together and for us to spend some real time thinking about where and how we wanted to use the expertise and the interest in this room to help improve the project strategies. And what Shoshana listed is what really shined through. It was around engagement with our employees, with our managers, with community, around every aspect of the project. And it was fun to sit down with him, and actually most of these questions came straight out of his mouth. So this is really where we came together as a team and are super excited to learn from you and work with you. And we again improved in our strategies by your input.
And I understand that you're joining, there's a little bit of catch up, like we are, it's almost like a freight train running down to get to January 1, 2025. But that doesn't mean that we can't stop and engage not only with this group, but with the community on the key milestones that are going to be upcoming. Much of the work that we're talking about is in flight. And so the first couple of meetings, I know you have been trying to catch up to us and really understand what we've put in place to meet the voters' intent behind the charter amendments. So with that, I would really just open it up if there are any questions. Oh, good. There are lots of questions on the screen. So
Why don't we start with Juanita?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to thank Mike for the letter. It was incredibly helpful because it was very specific about what are the things that the specific questions. Now, my question to him and to you, to the team is, do we have a protocol and how do we send feedback? Because obviously, I'm sure that many of us have already ideas based on the questions that we received in the letter that we can share, but I'm not sure about what is the protocol. Do we send that directly to Mike and to the transition team? What is the process? What is the protocol?
thank you so much for the question. So I'd ask that all the communication go through Julia so that we can
Okay.
manage them as public comments and public questions, and so that we're able to respond accordingly. And then I think we have it on the calendar that we'll be here monthly, Mike and myself, or myself and Sonia as necessary to answer any questions. So you'll be getting a regular update from the project sponsors and the project team, in addition to the various briefings or deeper dive topics that we'll be talking about. So we should be in pretty frequent conversation, and I don't want you to feel like you have to wait for a meeting in order to ask a question. So feel free to send those questions to Julia. She'll collect them, and we'll either address them in our update or in a way appropriate for the timing of the question. Does that sound good?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's very helpful.
Yeah, and we're still building this, so if we don't get it right the first time, we're always welcome to adjust.
Yeah. Should we also CC our co-chairs while we do that? When we send the feedback to Julia?
That'd be
That would
great.
be very helpful if you did that.
Okay, we will do that. Thank you.
Ina's up next.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for putting together this document. I know this was that everything is in motion, and so I know how difficult it is to kind of like sit down and think through this stuff. I kind of had a similar question to Juanita. When I kind of read through this at first, these questions cover a lot of very broad topics that the feedback can come in a very wide variety of information. And we're all volunteers, and kind of at our core, we're going to represent these questions to the community. So I guess I just would ask you guys to kind of clarify some of these questions, like really distill them, like specifically, we need, like in, for example, community and employee engagement. Are there strategies for community and employee engagement aligned with the project's desired outcomes and city core values? Like, that's really, really broad. So we need, like, is this specific policy going to affect communities negatively? Something that we could like take out and actually get feedback on.
I really appreciate that question, and I think we're gonna actually be able to put that section in motion today. You're gonna hear
Yeah.
about some of our employee engagement. So when you're hearing about the presentation about service delivery, thinking about these questions, I think will be really helpful for the team as you're reflecting on what we've learned from employees and our strategies moving forward. You're gonna also see our community engagement plan. So again, when we're here talking about our community engagement plan, thinking about these questions and other questions, any other questions that you have that you want to fill out the work would be really helpful for feedback.
Like by email?
Either in email or in the meeting at the time of the presentation.
Okay.
So tonight's presentation will be a lot about our employee engagement strategies and what we've learned. So, you know, thinking about what's worked for in your organizations, you know, are we reflecting back to you strategies that you think are in alignment with what we're trying to achieve? You know, these are just some questions, but your experience and expertise is really helpful for us to make sure that we're on the right track. And if not, to of course correct.
I guess just to like underscore the point of just narrowing the focus, because these again are like, each one of these could be like a whole novel. So just like, how can we give you like a single sentence or like really super clear, because this is like, each of these is a.
Well taken, thank you.
Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think of it in two ways. One is, these are kind of illustrative questions of how we hope you're thinking as you're listening to our presentations. And these are areas where we would love feedback in the moment and as follow-up after you've heard from us. And when we bring you particular questions that we're wanting you to take out and then bring feedback back about, they need to be tight and manageable and answerable in that time frame and in that venue. So that's accountability is on our side. I take your point.
I think we've got Destiny up next.
Kind of touching on what was just being said, I feel like, and I volunteered for the community engagement, but I think that I love this letter. It was great. It helped me think about what our role is. And I think maybe the intention and the audience have kind of been convoluted in this list. I think for community engagement, our goal is voter education, right? And we don't know how to speak about the transition if we don't know what questions they have, and we need to be engaged. Employee engagement, from the questions there, that really sounds like change management. Like, how are we engaging? And it sounds like we're going to learn more about employee engagement, but I think that should be under change management, because how are we going to be great managers and great, employers if we're not listening? And so I feel like maybe those questions were a little convoluted in different like titles where they shouldn't have been. And I think when we think about like who's our audience that we're really looking towards, and what's the purpose of going to them, and what's the questions we want to hear or that we want to ask, helps. And so I thought that those questions were great, just in different sections.
Thank you for that. And we do have a community engagement plan that you'll be looking at shortly. It's under development, and Julia is taking the lead on developing that work. I would think that the way the project is thinking about community engagement is about that full continuum of engagement, everything from inform and through education, and also places where there's an opportunity for real feedback on what the future of our organization looks like and feels like, and how people are interacting with it. So there is that full continuum of engagement. So voter education, a key component, but there's also education around how to interact with our new form of government. And so the elections methods is a key component of that work, and making sure, but there's also what does it actually mean to have a representative government that's got 12 legislative counselors? It's just different. So what does it mean to have a district-based representative. So that would fall more into the education components. So I think you'll see, I'm hoping that you'll see I think it's a pretty robust engagement plan where we kind of are in all of those places, everywhere from inform, consult, engage, and help decide.
Fred?
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, the first meeting, we were trying to figure out how to facilitate our procedures. And we shortchanged you on time to make the presentation, Mike and the rest of you. And you got to the budget and it flashed on the screen and went away. And I noticed in his letter of May 4th, which I did not get, that he asked about the budget. And without knowing what's in it, I have some questions about, I understand that you have retained or are retaining professional change management consultants, professional community outreach consultants, and I guess who else? And are you working with anyone that's dealing with, maybe they're in the change management contract? It might not hurt us to see your contracts with those consultants so that we know what the scope is. And that helps us understand what your plans are, whether your plans match the scope and whether they could be improved upon. Just seems like you could use our expertise in that regard as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Again, we started contracting for this project prior to the election.
Of course.
So I'm sure there are several people around the table that understand how long it takes to go through a contracting process with the government. So the contracts that we have in place are, one, to support the Independent District Commission. So districting expertise, that is with Flow Analytics. They're nationally known districting firm, and they've been under contract since, I think, January. We have a change management contract with Next Strategies. Happy to bring that Next NEX Strategies. Happy to bring our consultant here to talk with you and have an opportunity for you to have a dialogue with them and our work with them in order to implement these changes. They are really providing executive support and the backbone of our employee engagement and change management strategies for the project. That includes everything from our organizational structure to the roles and responsibilities of our elected officials to implementing how our current leadership interacts with the future form of government. So it's a pretty broad scope, and it is really around skills development and strategy and implementation of our change management strategies. A lot of that is a little up in the air since we are still building the organization that we're driving towards. So I think you'll see more information about that going forward.
Are the contracts online and somewhere in the Portland, Oregon City website, or?
I can follow up with that. I'll just check with our procurement organization about how.
As far as community outreach or voter education, I'd heard prior to our convening that there had been some discussion in City Hall that perhaps the budget was overambitious for outreach, in that it was proposing to reach out to a multitude of interest groups that may appear too political.
So let me there's a couple questions in there. So an additional contract that we have an RFP out right now for voter education and a voter education partner. And I might defer questions about the RFP for that contract to Julia, who's been really instrumental in that. But our hope is to have a contractor on board by the end of the fiscal year. And they will be helping design our voter education program and helping identify community organizations that really can deliver the voter education efforts that we're planning for. So we're really in the planning stages for voter education. And we're really lucky. I know you have a great history in voter education, and we have others on the team that they're also really active in this space. So our best thinking is to bring a voter education partner on now that has experience and talents with ranked choice voting and district elections, so that we can educate the community about that. And absolutely, we're going to be targeting communities that are underrepresented and have either low voter turnout historically, the elderly, and other groups that we've seen great success in other communities that have been implementing ranked choice voting.
And I'm
I'm gonna interrupt for just a second.
Thank
We've
you.
got 5 minutes left. on
Oh,
this
sorry,
topic.
I just,
So can we
yeah.
just for an
yeah, that's
opportunity,
fine.
let's
Go ahead.
take one more question. Juliet's up next. I know we've got
But
a
I'm also
lot
going
more
to pin
than
that you
that.
want to talk more about voter education.
We've
Yeah.
got a lot
Yeah.
more questions
That's-
on here that folks are just gonna, I think we're gonna have to submit them offline. But let's take one more question from Juliet before we close.
Okay, thanks very much. First of all, I've neglected in the previous meetings to state my pronouns, which are she, her. I really appreciate hearing from the League of Women Voters. So here's one group that's fallen in our lap. How do we stay in touch with them and keep them? You know, they've come to us. We don't even have to go find them. So how do we make them look? How do we make the most of that? And then I appreciated this document. Now I understand it sounds like it's context and it's just to be kind of in the back of our minds as we go forward. I really appreciate that. And it sounds like some of it is TBD, like these future budgets, right? And I've already made a lot of comments on it. And I too am very interested in the change management process. I think it's essential for what we're doing. So I'll stop at that.
Thanks, Juliet. That means we have time for another one. Jane.
Yeah, thank you. I think I had read that there were going to be some really fabulous help in developing the community outreach plan and voter education and for the change management. And I think it would be great to get those consultants to present what they do, because they do this for a living and they've done it other places, and then keeping Mike's fabulous and excited ideas in the back of our heads, add some more into that. I did, when I worked at the port for a long time, we did a huge change management program. We moved everybody out to the airport. We got rid of the building. We ditched all kinds of departments. We completely reorganized it. And there was a committee of employees and others who helped the consultant finesse their plan. And that's what I kind of like see this being, that these people know what it is that they're doing. They know the issues within the city and their employees, but we've all worked for organizations who've done that. And keeping Mike's questions in the back, we probably have the same ones. So I just want to thank you for your work. Thank you for the League of Women Voters, because boy, are we going to need them. But I think that you guys are on the right track. And I think that it's becoming clearer what out of this process, what we are to do. There are smart people, you guys included, who are developing and know all of this stuff. And you're going to run stuff by us and we're going to say, this is our experience. Because when I read this, I thought, oh, holy shit, I'm on this committee. I'm on this community committee. And this is a lot of big stuff. And then I remembered you've got a consultant that's designing the plan. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I will just mention that we are developing out, I think what might be similar to what you experienced, a change champion
Yeah.
core. We're just in the beginning stages of kind of figuring out what that is going to look like. And we're looking to some previous experience here at the city. But absolutely, if you have experience that we can tap, we'll be happy to reach out to you about that.
That's all the time we've got for this
Yeah,
topic, unless you
course.
want to wrap it up. And
No, appreciate it. Happy to have more discussion. We will be regulars on your agenda. If my inclination is for it to be much more of a dialogue and to answer your questions in the moment, and bring important issues and questions that we have that you can add to with your experience. So thank you so much again for serving, and we're really happy you're here. And we understand that we've been throwing a lot at you. The first few meetings were a lot of information, and I do want to just make one more plug. You were given a copy of our draft transition plan. We're working on version 3. So if you have any comments, I know it's kind of a push. If you're able to get us any comments by Monday on the existing plan, it may have changed since you've seen it, but you know, we really do want to have your input and thoughts. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And for those that had questions that we didn't get to, if you could write them in the chat, and they'll get into the minutes.
Actually, have a question not for Shoshana, but more about this to all of us. If you see, the questions are very focused, some of them, but they no longer match up to our proposed schedule. Like, for instance, there's questions like, did we do the right things in the current budget, and or the things we need to add in the supplemental budget in the fall? Yet in our schedule, we don't talk about city budgeting till late October, which would be too late to answer those questions. So I think it would be good for Julia or the chairs or maybe all of us to really look at the questions being asked and see if we either have to form work groups or move things up the schedule. Because if not, we're never going to be able to answer all those things.
Right, and so the co-chairs meet with Julia after the meeting, and we talk about what did we hear, and we have a proposed agenda, but what do we need to do different about the agenda based on input and feedback. So that's really helpful.
It's a late night.
No, not tonight.
Oh.
I don't know if
The
I did
days
for that.
following. Good, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to Dave to introduce the next topic.
Give me one moment here, guys. I am working through it right now. All right, so with that being said, I believe our next topic is, give me a second here. You already did this piece.
Live through the slides up to the next.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I'm doing the same thing on my end. Our next topic should be, yes, it's the phase. Okay, keep going.
There we go.
Right there, yes, there it is. Okay, so with this, okay, so with this, we have just a hair over an hour tonight for the service delivery area of work, okay? Join us for this agenda item are Barry Pack, a senior advisor to the mayor on the transition, and we have Becky Tilson, transition service delivery manager, and Jamie. I'm sorry, Jamie, how do you say your last name? Duhamel?
Duhamel.
Oh, okay, I apologize for that.
No problem.
A strategic engagement and project delivery coordinator. Becky and Jamie will lead the presentation, but they are all here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, David. Hi, everybody. I'm Becky Tilson, like he said, the service delivery manager for the transition project. I use she, her pronouns. I'm here with Jamie today to talk about this body of work. I'm going to give a brief overview of the service delivery project. The scope of that work has been evolving. It's a little bit different than the other components of the project, and that it's kind of a newer component of this. And then hopefully we're going to spend most of our time on our employee engagement and community engagement plans, what we've already done, what we're thinking about doing. And Jamie is leading that work, so she's going to lead us through that part of the conversation. Sounds like from what we just talked about, there's a lot of interest in that. So I'm excited to get to that part. And I think we can also cover some of the change management concepts that were coming up in the last conversation specific to this, but also, change management applies to the entire project. So I'll speak to it a little bit in our context, but I think there'll be space in the conversation for the larger application of best practices. That sounds good. Okay, so I know you all had a high level, can you go to the next slide, please, Nicole? I know you had a high level overview at the first meeting from Mike and Shoshana about service delivery, but I'm going to kind of hit the highlights again, just to make sure we're all on the same page about it. And feel free to hop in at any moment with questions, comments, interrupt me whenever you need to. So the service delivery stream of work The way we're conceived of it at the moment is that it has two core deliverables. So the first one is a high-level organizational structure for the bureaus that is manageable by a city administrator. It's very different from the way that the bureaus are organized now, where we all report up to 5 different council offices. In terms of the scale of the change, we're keeping it at a pretty high level. We're keeping it at the program level and above program as defined by program offer in the budget. I'll talk about why in a second, but we're really focused on making this implementable. We have a short time frame to do this, and we want to set up this new city administrator for success. As our friend Sonia likes to say, we are going to do what we can do well. The second deliverable for this body of work is a longer term plan. It's a set of recommendations, some of which we may pursue before January of 25, many of which will go into a recommendation to our new elected officials and city administrator about process improvements, policy changes, deeper structural changes, communication changes, ways to break down silos between bureaus to improve our service delivery to Portlanders. So that's on a much longer time frame, but all of those ideas are swimming around in the community feedback we're getting and the employee feedback we're getting, in conversations we're having now. It's our longer term deliverable. So right now we're focused on the organizational structure, and we are going to be forwarding a recommendation to council for their consideration in October of this year. In order to get there between now and October, we're working with bureau leadership, with council offices, with subject matter experts from bureaus in the 5 service areas that the mayor assigned in January. So hopefully everybody saw that resolution in January. The mayor assigned all the bureaus kind of with like services to one of 5 service areas. So we're working together in those 5 service areas to assess, to assess our current structure, something in my throat, and prepare recommendations for a new reporting structure. Again, up to a city administrator as opposed to up to 5 council offices. We're working on the time frame between now and October for a couple of reasons. Change management is one of them. I'll talk about that in a second, but first one is technical implementation. So budget process, what do they say, an 18-month annual budget process? The budget process really is going to kick off in earnest for the fiscal year that is inclusive of January 2025 this October. So we need to have the decisions made so that we can budget in the new structure appropriately. There's also a lot of back-end alignments. We had a conversation yesterday with a lot of the people that are going to be doing the heavy lifting on this around SAP, HR, code, other sort of critical things that we need to align. So this, if we make the decisions by October, it will give us time to implement all those technical alignments. And then the second piece is change management. So I'll talk about this in a second. Change management is a lot bigger than just the implementation piece, but during implementation, we really want to make sure that we're focusing on the people that are going to be experiencing the change, making sure that everybody understands what's happening, what the new reality is going to mean for them, that they have any training that they need, that they are able to be prepared for the new organizational structure. This is not going to be a light switch. It's not going to be like one day we wake up and we're in a brand new structure. It's going to take time to implement, which is why change management is so important. But by the time January 1, 2025 rolls around, we will be in the new structure. So I said before that we're looking at the program level and above. This gives us kind of a discrete number of puzzle pieces with which to operate. So we're not swallowing the entire ocean here. We are doing something that is discrete. Our goal is to create an organizational structure that is rational, that has reasonable spans of control, that has logical groupings of programs and bureaus, so that we can attract a city administrator candidate to run an organization that is functional. And then also so that person, when they get here on their very first day, can have an organization that is functional, that they can begin to manage effectively. And then, right, we have this other deliverable, our set of recommendations for process improvements, for policy changes, for future structural changes that the new elected officials and the new city administrator will be able to look at, apply their own sort of policy priority lens to, and implement as they see fit. We are setting the stage for all of that to happen. I don't know if we're running short on time, but I did want to speak quickly to the name service delivery. What I just described is not really adequately summed up by the term service delivery. And service delivery is a little bit of a holdover from back before we knew what this was. So we've been thinking a little bit recently about how to rebrand it. We haven't done a ton of outward community-based communication about service delivery. So if we're going to rebrand it, now's the moment before we start doing that. And Jamie's going to talk in a few minutes about our engagement plans with community. So we haven't kind of landed this yet, but I'm thinking about taking these two deliverables and separating them into two discrete things when we talk about it, when we communicate it out into the world, city organization, and future improvements to service delivery. I don't know if we have time today, but I will just say if anybody has any thoughts about how to brand that appropriately, now that I've expressed what it is, if you feel like some keywords are jumping into your mind about how to describe it better, I would certainly welcome that. Again, we haven't made any choices yet, but we are on the path. Can you go to the next slide, please?
We do have one question.
Yeah.
Since you said you don't, is it,
Thank you.
you can wait. Okay,
General process.
go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, we'll come back to you for sure. So schedule briefly. So I think you've seen this schedule before. You probably saw it in your first presentation. This service delivery and bureau management stream is the blue bars along the bottom. So I just want to give you a little bit of a sense of where we are in the schedule. So it says programmatic assessments in service areas. That's the bar that we're in right now. I mentioned these assessments a little bit earlier when I was talking about the 5 service areas working together. We are doing these assessments in 3 phases. The first phase is happening right now. It's kind of about where the programs are currently situated, how they interact with one another. There's a series of guided questions that we have asked teams to kind of work through. They're going to be preparing a report to us in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll launch in phase 2, which is kind of going to be a continuation of that. We're still trying to figure out exactly what phase 2 is. That'll start next month, but it's really going to be, I think as Barry likes to say, giving more oxygen to the conversations that have started in phase 1. And then talking a little bit about this role of leadership management between the city administrator and the bureaus. The third phase is where we are going to build the actual org chart recommendation. So that is what is coming in these programmatic assessments that's going to lead us to this recommendation of council in October. This is something that I suppose we could have like gone into a back room and just drawn an org chart on the wall, but we really felt committed to having shared ownership of this from the organization. So we've done employee engagement, which Jamie will talk about, and we're really trying to involve the people that are going to be impacted to the extent possible, so that at the end of the day, this is somewhat of a shared vision for what the future state is going to be. When we think about change management, sometimes just, people do reorgs like this all the time, right? They just plop down a decision on Friday afternoon, and on Monday, the switch has flipped, and that is not the way that we're doing this. So I'll say we're briefly on the schedule. Once we get to October decisions, our focus shifts a little bit to 3 things. Technical implementation, like I talked about, ramping up change management and supporting employees who are going to be experiencing this change, and then continuing to think about what future recommendations we might come up with. I also just wanted to reflect a little bit on change management. So we talk about this a lot, and I like to say that it is the how of how we approach this project. And I think that there are examples of the ways that we have applied change management across the entire transition project from the first day, from when Julia was facilitating the Charter Commission years ago. There's our commitment to voter education, I think, is a great example specific to service delivery. We are, like I said, engaging the people who are going to be impacted by change and coming up with the decisions so that it's co-created and co-owned by the organization. We have committed to rigorous communication and engagement with our internal stakeholders. We're building an external stakeholder engagement plan. We're partnering with City Hall. We're bringing people along. We're engaging our various stakeholders. And so I think there is definitely room for improvement there. And it's also the way that I think we had a conversation with somebody a couple of months ago where they're like, when's change management going to start? When is this going to start? It started, it's happening. It's guiding how we build out the work plans for each of the components of this work. And I hope that we can continue to do that. We do have the consultant on board who's helping us figure out, they recently provided the entire team with the training about change management, a specific methodology, and how we might apply those best practices to the individual work streams in the project and to the project plan as a whole. So it's definitely something we talk about, and also definitely something that we welcome, because it is a complex and kind of gray, hard to like put your finger on area. But I think we have shared commitment to it and understanding of the importance of it. And so we'd love to continue to have conversations with this group about how best to apply it. So in the schedule, I'm going to transition to Jamie here. There are a number of places where we are looking for engagement from our various stakeholders, employees, and community. And Jamie's going to talk about what we've done and what we're thinking about for the future. So take it away, Jamie.
There are a couple hands up. Do we want to take
Oh, I
questions
didn't see
about
those. Thank
what you
you.
just talked about first?
Go ahead.
What about Commissioner Santana?
Juanita, do you have one pertinent to the first part of the presentation?
Not Commissioner.
You're on mute.
You're on.
You're on
mute.
Juanita.
Yeah, sorry about that. I always forget to unmute myself. Anyway, again, I want to make sure that I understood correctly. I hear you said that you're doing the programmatic assessments. They are taking place right now, but that you also mentioned something about looking into the silos, making sure that the operations move from the silo approach to be more coordinated, collaborative, more effort. However, you also mentioned that this is a long-term plan. What did you, again, I might have misunderstood you. Is that correct? Is that what I hear, that this implementing the changes will be a long-term plan?
Yeah, so there's kind of two timeframes that we're operating on here with regard to organizational structure. This is, my conversations here tonight are just about organizational structure.
Yes.
Shoshana was talking about all the other components of this, so I'm just talking about this one piece. We have two timeframes that we're operating on. One is this short-term October, we've got to get a decision about the high-level organizational structure by October of this year. And then the second one is much longer term, is thinking about what else outside of moving programs around we might do to improve the way that we deliver services. So that's where we might talk about breaking down silos, process improvements, moving things around that are not at the program level, that are either below or above that. There's other opportunities for conversation about what those improvements might look like.
Yeah, I am a little bit concerned about that. And again, when we're talking about change, it is, that is one of the main issues, I think, that why the voters wanted to change the way the city is managed because of the service delivery issues. And so I think that when we do, and this is just my personal opinion, but I just want to make sure that I comment on that when you do change, when you look into the programmatic assessments in terms of how services are being delivered, it is important to start really looking what would be the most effective and efficient way to organize the city government, the management of the city. So by then saying we're going to do this now, we're going to do the budget, but then later on we're going to be looking on the silos and all of those other issues. I feel like it would be important to put those actually in the front rather than in the later. And again, that's just dealing with change to the level that is going to take place in the city. It will be more difficult, I think, for the staff to then say, well, we're going to wait to change it. If we're talking about change, we should be doing it to have it all implemented in the short term. Well, not short term, because we have 2 years, so it's plenty of time.
All right, Terry.
Just a concern in general, I mean, there's a lot of other things to take into consideration when we're talking about change, and I agree with you regarding the staff and their involvement, effective and active involvement, and how we're doing these changes and the reasons why. So I think the approach and how do we conduct it is going to be critical, but I just want to make sure that we don't wait until they say, well, it's going to be, when we talk about long-term is what? 2 years, 5 years, 3 years, 6 years, so I'm curious about that.
No, I mean, I hear you. I think that's a good point. I think that, change takes a long time, and trying to balance sort of the urgency of this moment And the fact that change takes a long time, how to kind of marry those two things is definitely on the top of our minds. Talk about that all the time. And if, you know, we're coming back to this space, maybe we can continue that conversation. I looked at Julia and the co-chairs on the agenda, but finding that right balance, I think, is key.
Can I just add one piece? So in terms of, there's been a lot of chat in the Q&A about comparative cities. In our work to find comparative cities who have experienced change, there are cities that have reorganized. There have been cities that have moved to a new, different form of government. There have been cities that have done elements of our change. We are doing all of this change right now. And so we are prioritizing those pieces that we need in order to have an effective and rational government open on January 1st, 2025. And in order to do that, this organizational work that Jamie and Becky are leading is so critical, so that we can have that new leadership step in and have a organization that they can manage. So it is, and in addition, all of the additional election methods. So we're hoping that voters will see change immediately when they go to the ballot. They will see change immediately when they elect representation that is at the district level. So the service delivery change is one component of that. It is our job to tell the story of all the change that people are going to see and when they're going to see it and how they can expect it.
Thanks, Shoshana. Totally agree.
I wonder if we want to, I'm conscious of being able to get through the presentation. We've got a long line of questions is coming in. Maybe we should finish the presentation and then
Yes.
entertain the rest of the questions.
Sure.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jamie Duhamel. I use she, her pronouns. I think you heard my ridiculously long title, but functionally what I do for the Charter Transition Team is that I spend half my time managing the Independent Salary Commission, which is, as you know, the body that's going to determine the salaries for the future electeds in the form of office that takes place January 1st, 2025. So you'll see me come back to this table with you to talk about that work. I believe we're scheduled for early June. So I look forward to that. And so the other half of my time right now, I spend focusing on our strategic engagement strategies for the bucket of work that Becky just described. After July, when the Independent Salary Commission wraps up, I look forward to being full-time on this work and talking about how we do change management more broadly and really ramp up our efforts after October. Would you mind changing the slide? Slide, please. There are two different types of engagement I want to talk to you about tonight. I want to kind of give you an understanding of the employee engagement framework that we're currently operating under. So you have a full understanding of like how we're making the decisions we are, plus a little kind of high level description of where we're at, like what we just learned. We released an engagement report just this week, so we have some high level information. I wasn't intending to go into a deep dive about that engagement report tonight, but that's something maybe we can follow up with you later. And then I want to really spend time talking about our community engagement framework because it's still very much in draft form. I have very specific questions to ask you about how to structure that engagement framework. So I see a lot of hands in the chat. I was hoping this could kind of be a back and forth conversation, but maybe we should just wait to the end and then take questions one at a time just because that's the way it's going. So let's start with the employee engagement framework. This obviously sets the foundation for the decisions that we make, both in this kind of near-term organizational restructuring work that's happening now, but also the long-term engagement that Becky described, or the long-term change that will be happening. To really put this framework together, we got a lot of feedback from a variety of sources, including the citywide Equitable Engagement Committee. We met with our Unified Comms team, which is a large body of communications experts. We met with a number of city managers, or not city managers, equity managers, about how to make sure we were leading with equity, and council leadership as well. So So I imagine what you see on the screen is kind of a stylized version of what I'm sure you recognize as a very same structure you're using to set your own engagement framework. It follows the same pattern. We first start with our kind of purpose and goals, which is the why are we doing this engagement work to begin with, right? That leads into our values and principles, which really means how are we going to be pursuing those goals or upholding those goals. And then the objectives are really the kind of practical application of those concepts. So what is the what, when, where of how we're actually going to do all of this work? So I'm going to walk you through this in terms of how we've put it together for employees. The first purpose and goal for us is that we want to build trust with people who work at the City of Portland. And that really means, you know, providing meaningful opportunities for employees to engage or provide input in ways that actually inform the decisions that are being made. Essentially, high level, that means we commit to only asking what will inform. And that's a really tricky balance, right? Because it's really hard to ask specific questions and then bring that information to leaders who are making that decision. And we can't quite always guarantee how that information will be used. So we did a lot of deep thinking about how we were gonna ask questions, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. We also really want to promote affinity with City of Portland employees. And really that means developing a sense of shared ownership and excitement about this opportunity. We really want to communicate that everyone is important to our success and the success of this work. We also want to develop leadership with people who are working here. And that means to us building a network of employees who are not only informed, but they're actively contributing, they're learning, and they're sharing with us as we move forward. It's really about inspiring and motivating our greatest assets. And finally, we want to provide guidance. And for us, that means really collecting and making available to employees and to city leadership quality data, best practices, and the best change management principles that are developed through equitable strategies, because we recognize that information is power. So in order to build trust, we have committed to being transparent about how we gather information, deliberate, and make those decisions. Essentially, we've committed to keeping no secrets. And to promote affinity, we intend to focus our limited resources on inclusive and kind of non-traditional forms of engagement, in addition to our more traditional forms. But we really want to ensure that we can hear from employees across the city organization that don't have access to mass communication techniques like emails and computers. Really, we're trying to communicate that we are in this together. To develop leadership, we've committed to seek out and utilize employee expertise on our engagement strategies and our practices to really best meet our responsibilities for clear, consistent, and accurate information, because we value employee experience. And to provide guidance, then we intend to be role models and seek actionable ways to uphold the city's core values, especially anti-racism, in our work, and hold ourselves accountable to those. Essentially, we intend to lead by example. So that's a lot of really nice words. Doesn't quite mean anything unless we put them into action. And so that's what our objectives are all about. I want to make sure you know that we are thinking deeply and actually creating actionable items from this. So the first thing that we did was create a survey crosswalk tool. And this tool is basically a table that kind of directly connects the questions of the programmatic assessment teams. The ones that Becky mentioned, they have a very specific focus set of questions in their syllabus that we've asked them to answer in this phase. And we've lined up those questions with questions that we can ask employees that would directly inform those answers. And this tool is really used to help us kind of craft the right questions that are most relevant to the decisions being made. We use it to help guide the programmatic assessment teams on the use of the engagement data, so they know how to best apply it when they're answering those questions. And it's used as a transparency tool with employees, so they know exactly how the information that they are providing to us is intended to be used by the decision makers in this situation. I'm going to show you a little kind of snippet of what that survey crosswalk tool looks like. It's a much longer document than what I can show on the screen, but you can certainly have access to that as well if you'd like to see the full tool. We also intend to, or we did, sorry, create a staffing plan that dedicates enough time and resources to implementing the non-traditional engagement strategies to gather input from staffing groups. Again, the idea is not to kind of over prioritize one, employee over another. It's really a recognition that it takes more time and effort sometimes for us to reach folks who don't have the ability to sit in front of a computer all day. And it's worth taking that time and effort to make sure that they have the communication available to them and they have the opportunity to provide input in the same way that other employees do. Our third objective here is super interesting, very early stages, and I imagine this committee is going to be very interested in helping us craft this one. We are in the early stages of putting together a change ambassadors program. And so the idea of that is it's a program that will kind of recruit and identify staff from all the bureaus to kind of work more closely with the service delivery project team in the process of change management. So, this project, I think we're calling it a pilot at this point, is intended to really create kind of communication channels that can help the project team give and receive information from a broader range of employees. It's going to really help us leverage the experience and expertise of people who work at the city who are natural leaders and inspired to help provide better outcomes and hopefully help us vet the effectiveness of our communication and engagement so we can really iterate and improve in real time. So really looking forward to seeing how we can put that together and maybe create liftoff at the end of summer, early fall. And I think that's probably a piece of work we can come back to this committee to talk about as we structure it. And finally, we have created, it's in draft form, but very nearly final. It's a framework in partnership with the charter transition team for centering racial equity to help guide all of the decisions that we make. And so we use this framework in a variety of ways. It helps us decide between options, especially when we're in disagreement with each other. We have this framework to help us to, keep these core values as our North Star. It really helps us hold ourselves accountable to kind of creating intentionally anti-racist policies and decisions. It helps provide instruction on how we kind of seek, utilize, and deliver information and opportunities. And it really helps unify the entire charter transition team under the same umbrella of equitable outcomes. It's a transition-wide document that we use. And finally, it will help provide a commitment to measuring our outcomes. So we will be developing specific measurement to determine outcomes. And I imagine this group would be interested in helping us craft those as well. All right, that was a lot of words. Hopefully you have a good idea of kind of where we've set in our foundation for this work. Next slide, please. So what we've done, Becky showed you a timeline before. In April, on April 11th, it's right there, we released a survey to employees and we closed it on the 28th. It was only 17 days long, but we got a remarkable amount of feedback. We received 950 employee responses and 123 manager responses. So I'm going to explain a little bit about how we put the survey together and why there were two surveys to begin with. What you see on the screen is a little snippet of what is the survey crosswalk tool that I was describing earlier. And as you can see, if you read from left to right on the survey crosswalk tool, it looks really hard to read on the screen. Apologies if you can't actually read it or see it. We'll make sure that you can have access to the document directly, but essentially what it does is it lists all of the different assessment questions that leadership are considering and answering. Then it identifies a very specific question, a survey question that's intended to inform that assessment. And then the purpose of how you would use that information and how we will provide that in data format. The idea here is that what we're not trying to do is ask us, we're not trying to, I guess, it's hard to describe a little bit, but we're not trying to ask people who work at the city how they would specifically answer the assessment questions that the leadership are answering, because we cannot guarantee that if the majority of people answered a specific way, that that would end up being the decision of the decision makers, right? And that's a way in which we erode trust. When we ask a very specific question and we gather very specific feedback, and then that feedback does not feel like it is in any way utilized to actually make a decision. So instead, the approach to our questions is very much about their experiences as people who work for the city of Portland. What are their relationships like with different bureaus and different programs? What is working well for them and what is not working well for them? How does this structure help enable them to complete their jobs successfully? How does it enable or hinder their ability to deliver services to Portlanders? How does it help or hinder their ability to uphold city core values? So that's the nature of the questions we receive, so that the information that we're providing to leadership is more about an opportunity to see a snapshot about how the bureaus are functioning. How are the relationships working in a way that allows them to really vet their own assumptions when they're sitting around talking about how should we move things around, what bureaus should be in, in a service area with another bureau. They can use this information to say, well, this is how employees are perceiving their relationships. In some cases, they have a relationship with a bureau outside of a service area because that's required to do their work. There's any number of ways in which this information can be used as one form of data amongst several to identify patterns and surprises. It is not intended to provide answers. It is not intended to say, the employee said this, therefore your decision should be this. And again, that's a way in which we help to maintain trust and transparency with employees about how this work is being used. So just high level, the survey was designed using the survey crosswalk tool, and in doing so, we recognize that some of the questions that the programmatic assessment teams were asked to answer were around specific programs. We don't have a really clear, consistent definition of programs across the board, and so we weren't able to provide kind of a multiple choice answer for folks. And because of that, we decided that the best definition of programs would be in the bureau budgets, and the people who had the best access to those budgets and understanding program names and how programs work or don't work would be managers. And so what we did was we created two separate surveys because when managers will answer questions about what bureau they're in and what programs they're in, they take the risk of not being as anonymous as they would taking the other employee survey. So we wanted to give them the option of providing information that was a little less safe, a little more risky for them to provide so that they had the choice. So we sent them all out at the same time, asked managers to take both if they were comfortable, and we're providing that information in a different way.
Were the questions the same, or did you have a slide with that? I didn't see it in
The manager questions are in the survey crosswalk tool. So once you have access to that crosswalk tool, you'll be able to see all of the questions that we ask employees
Julio.
and managers. Yeah. And then we did a series of communications, obviously emails and flyers. And we also had a bunch of discussions with staff and folks who work directly with people who work in the field, people who work in direct service, to better understand how we could engage with them and make sure that they were part of this process. And there's definitely a few things we learned, and I want to make sure to share those with you. Do you mind turning to the next slide, please? Sorry, it's so hard to see. So we released our our very first employee engagement report this week. Very excited to have it out there. We sent it to the programmatic assessment leads on Monday, and we just released it to the rest of the City of Portland employees today. with an invitation to retake the survey. So let's talk about that. So I think I already described what this employee engagement report is intended to do. There's a lot of information in it. I don't know if you received a copy of it yet or not, but let's be sure that you do. It is very thorough. It's intended to be very thorough. Our intention was to be extremely transparent about what we did, why we did it, what information, we got. And so I'm gonna, maybe this is an opportunity for you, and, when you get a chance to read that engagement report, we can come back and maybe answer more specific questions about it once you've had a chance to spend some time with it and think about it. I'd love to come and provide some guidance about how it's supposed to work together. We did that with the programmatic assessment leads today, just to help give them some application tools. But I mentioned the discussions we're having about how to reach folks in the field. And I would say that, the biggest takeaway in that process so far is that the way in which we engage with people who work at the city can be by nature very extractive. And it can really reduce people to their kind of units of work instead of kind of recognizing they are whole people who do work, right? And they are also going through a lot of change and also have a lot of kind of fear and anxiety about what is coming next. And so we were really asked to consider a better approach about better supporting how people feel rather than how they produce. And so a couple decisions, I'm gonna keep it really quick because I think I'm spending too much time on this.
Yeah, we got about 25 minutes left and we gotta get through all your community slides. and
Oh my
the
gosh.
conversation. So maybe, I don't know if you
20
want to
minutes
pause
left,
for
yeah.
conversation now, or if you want to maybe bust through those really super quickly.
Let's just go to the next thing. Like you read the report, we'll come back. How about that?
And maybe
Next.
just, let's just, since
I'm
we
going
wanna make sure
to,
everyone has a chance to speak who wants to.
do you mind? Okay. So I'm not gonna go through, I think it's self-explanatory what this framework says. What I wanna do is go through each one of these objectives one by one, because that's really where we need a lot of your input. Can you still not see this? So our 4 objectives to meet our purpose and goals and values and principles for the community engagement framework are to create a community input inventory so that we're reporting back to community what we've heard instead of going back out and asking the same questions that they've been asked a number of different times in a number of different ways for a number of different years, right? Our second objective is to create a transition-wide engagement plan that is reflective of all the positive change that's happening across the spectrum and not just kind of narrowly focused on this particular piece of the work. Our third objective is to have develop relationships, which means regular meetings with partners like GTAC and others in community. And finally, our fourth objective is to develop tools to remove access barriers. So let's start going through those one at a time really quick. No.
I'm just wondering if you want to maybe take questions first. I'll leave that to you. I'm just trying to make sure we.
I see some nods.
Yeah, it's good to get the information because that's why you're here. And I know that we want to give some feedback, so perhaps we've got 15 minutes, maybe spend 5 more minutes explaining the objectives, is that, or?
No, well,
you're
I
done.
mean, well, each objective has its own slide, but it looks like we're gonna skip to that last one, which is where we have the most need for your input.
Okay. The other slides too.
Okay, well, let's start with this one then, I guess, and go backwards if we have additional time. I'm sorry, I'm so verbose tonight. I didn't realize how much.
Jamie, I don't think you're verbal. I think it's like, it's so dense. This is a huge part of our work.
So
It-
interesting.
So maybe we take some questions, just because there's so many already lined up, on what we've already presented on. And then, we can, we'll send you our slides and follow up. Does that seem like I just want to make sure that your questions
Sure.
are answered.
We can come back.
That sounds good.
We can come back, we can do it in writing. We want to, how about that? So Bill, it looks like you're up and I don't want to take Lori's job.
Yeah, my comment is about process. And it speaks to some of what's going on in the room right now. You've got a lot of really talented people on this committee. And most of us are getting a chance to make 1 or 2 comments each meeting we come to. And that's not a good use of the talent you have here. There've been a couple of suggestions already about subcommittees. You could easily form a subcommittee around this. You could form 5 or 6 subcommittees, which would really give each of us a chance to really engage in an area that we have expertise. If you're going to keep doing this process, you're going to take really good staff work, fine, but you're largely reading to us what you've already written down. We can read it and think about it and come with questions prepared or have a discussion amongst us. I mean, you're taking really good staff work and you're hamstrung it by the process that you've chosen here. So if you keep going on with this, you're not going to get from us anything like what you want. And if this is anything like a community engagement process, it's not going to work because you're going to be out there presenting to people in the community and not giving them time to really engage, which is only going to happen in small groups if they have information in advance and know specifically what you want feedback on. And if you go back through the comments, there have been a number of comments related to this. We want to know specifically what you want. We want to form subcommittees or break it up. And I'm not seeing that we're moving in that direction. I'm seeing that each meeting is a repeat of the kind of thing that we've had in the past.
Yeah.
And if I have some emotion in my voice, I'm frustrated by
I do hear
what's going on here. And it's not about the quality of work you're doing, it's about the process we've set up to engage with.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I think that that's something for the co-chairs to explore with you. What I do understand is that there's a work group on community engagement that's already been, people have self-identified and are going to be working specifically on community engagement. So absolutely, we recognize that that is an important component. I think it's for your organization to decide whether or not you want work groups or subcommittees. There are different, elements to each, that we could talk about. The value of the work is, I think, what's driving the interest in being together and working in small groups. Whether or not it's a work group like you've already got established for community engagement, or if you want to create a more formal subcommittee, which becomes public meetings and notices and all of those pieces, that's for this organization to decide. So I know that if you're interested specifically on community engagement, there is that work group that's already, their work is already underway to support our community engagement efforts.
And so we're already talking about this offline too. I think there's this difference between trying to provide education to this body about what's going on to get us all caught up. And then there'll be the opportunity to then start engaging and doing the work. So I think we're trying to find that balance. We're just in the beginning stages of it.
But I think that.
I'm sorry, I know I'm up here and I just want to second what we're saying. We are still, the train has already left the station, as is what's been repeated several times. And right now we are literally just catching up on all the information. Bill, I appreciate your honesty. And it would be great if you could email that to us so we have that. I was not aware that you were getting frustrated. This is the first I'm hearing of it. But as you see, when things are coming up, we are addressing them. Like we have this engagement, this committee, or I should say work group. It's not a committee, it's a work group. We are moving as fast as we can, but we are still catching up to the rest of the transition. And we are the only body, just so everybody's aware of this, we are the only body that has an above view of everything that's going on. Everybody else that's a part of the transition officially has their own, they have their own piece that they're working on. And we're the body that looks above and sees everything. So we just have a lot of catching up to do. So just show us a little grace, a little time. I guarantee you, Bill and everybody else who's sitting and listening on this, you will start seeing movement. You will start seeing actual work being done. Right now, we are just catching up.
And I just put in the chat that, we can also make a commitment, if you tell us the time frame that you need information prior to a meeting, and we'll do our best to meet that so that you can have information prior to it.
Terry?
Yeah, just a real quick, I agree exactly with what Bill said. So count me in on that too. But in the, trying to move the ball along a little bit and not at one time to talk tonight. I want to go back to some of the stuff that Becky was talking about and try and get my head around this at a 20,000 foot level to understand what the scope of the immediate change is going to be and why such a big investment in the immediate change when a whole new council is coming in 2 years and a whole new administrator is coming in 2 years. So maybe more specifically frame it. We have 5 service areas. Why 5? Why not 6? Why not 4? What, I get the impression that we're working under the current council's framing for an interim government that can go into place when the new council comes in 2025. But is it that we're investing a lot of change into something that will simply change again with a new council, new mayor, and new administrator, none of whom we've met yet? So that's my concern. And to paraphrase a line out of a recent Succession episode, we are a weak government in a difficult interregnum. And I think it's really important that we understand where we are in this. So anyway, it's a little rambly, but I have some real concerns here.
I appreciate that, Terry. Thank you for that. I can speak quickly to it in deference to the fact that we've got lots of hands, but just briefly, there are 5 service areas because there are 5 elected officials today, not because that is a magic number or the right number necessarily. So part of the conversations that we're having right now are service areas the right way to organize ourselves? And if so, how many do we need? So the current service area designation that we have right now is a starting point for conversation, not the end of the conversation. So that's that point about 5. Your point about why are we doing this now instead of waiting for the new elected officials? I think there's 2 valid arguments to be made on both sides of that. And the decision that was made on this side, in this case, was that we are trying to set up an organization that is manageable by 1 person. Right now, we have an organization that is manageable by 5. And we want to create the opportunity for that new person who rightfully we have not met. We don't know who they are. We don't even really know when they're going to be here, probably sometime in early to mid 2025. But they are going to need to have an organization that is manageable when they arrive. So we are working at a high level. We're not digging super deep into the organization. We are taking a high level stab at making something that is logical, that has reasonable spans of control, that when candidates are looking at our organizational chart, they'll say, okay, this is something that is manageable and will allow them when they get here to have something that they can be successful with. They will, of course, apply their own policy priorities to it, and the vision of that new person and the 13 new elected officials will absolutely be applied to it. We're taking a step in a direction to allow them to be successful at the beginning. I hope that helps, Terry, and I'm happy with you or with anyone to chat outside of this if that's appropriate and helpful.
And maybe just to put a finer point on it, Terry, is that if we did nothing, we would have 28 offices and bureaus. So the choice is that to not do something or to do something that is rational, just like Becky outlined, and will help us move in that direction. So we're hoping that this work will have that organization and rationality that's needed for to make that leap from our existing form of government and leadership to our future form of government. And we understand that it's even if we get it right, there's going to be changes, and there are going to be changes in the future with another city administrator, and our 3rd city administrator will also make changes.
I think just if I could take it just a second longer, is that I think it's important to understand that this is an interim thing and make it clear to voters that it's an interim thing. We're going to get something in place that we can work with, but it's not the be all and end all, because that comes later. That comes with the new government. So anyway, I appreciate the answer, and I know it's difficult to do, but I don't want to overstate where we're going to be on January of 2025. And I don't want to overwork people in change and make changes to code and changes to structures in September of this year that is going to somehow bind that future council. It's just really worrisome to me.
We share your concern and
Thanks, Terry.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely trying to right size this.
Thank you. Joe?
You know, I think I mostly want to second what a lot of people have said and add that I think the reason that some of us are frustrated, maybe all of us, isn't because anybody's doing anything wrong. Everybody's doing everything right. It's hard to hear Jamie apologize for being too verbose, for giving us information that we absolutely need to do our job. And it's just as hard to hear David sounding like, give us some time, we'll catch up, everything's going to be okay. I think that one way that we can serve is to be a microcosm for how other people must be feeling as well. That we've got a long way to go, and contrary to what Juanita said, a really short time to get there. January 2025 is going to come in a heartbeat, and we can't sequence these things so that structure comes before process improvement, comes before culture, because culture is happening all the time. And if there are staff members who are frustrated, that's going to affect everything else that happens. And if there are members of the public that are frustrated, that's going to affect everything that happens. And as a committee, I think we can just reflect that. So I think it's really important for us to take a deep breath, not to short circuit what our role is or what our process is, and figure out how we can be most effective in supporting, you know, people like Jamie in doing this incredibly important and incredibly hard job well.
Thanks, Joe. All right, we got 3 minutes. Let's see if we can get Zach and Juliet and Leah. Well, we'll see how it goes. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, so hi, everybody, I'm Zach. And I just wanted to reiterate like the delicate balance that, you know, these videos are also being recorded and can be potentially viewed by the public at large. And so it's also an educational tool. And so while we're, you know, as volunteers intended to have additional education coming in to have discourse, it's, you know, we have to balance that, the reality that we can engage with this material and learn at the same time, because that might be the medium that people are learning about this. My question was just thinking about, it's alluding a little bit to what Terry was saying in this like change management and the engagement strategy, because you alluded to, Becky, the engage, and you wanted to do some external stakeholder engagement. I was kind of curious what, like, is that phase 2 when it's still not, we haven't actually elected people? Is it phase 3 where we kind of like do those like pivots? But like I can envision there being this challenge of, you know, trying to, what everybody's been saying, like, and inform people that this is actually just an interim phase and we still need to change it again. Essentially, like we're taking a, you know, a phased approach and the change to government. But I don't know if that was like, is that codified that you had planned to do then phase 2 or phase 3?
So you're hitting on something that we talk about all the time, which is expectation management. So as the scope of work for service delivery and soon to be called something else has kind of come into focus, it's helped us really think about what do we want, like, you know, this engagement plan Jamie talked about, I'll let you speak to this too. I recognize we're running short on time, but is if we go out and do the biggest community engagement effort that anyone has ever seen, and then we change a few bureau alignments and then nothing else changes, that's a breach of trust. That is not the way that we want to do it. Same thing with employees. If we go out and say, everything's on the table and the whole world is going to change, and then we change a little bit, again, that's not honest or trust building. So that has been the guiding principle of all of our engagement planning for both internal and external stakeholders is, what are we actually doing here? What do people actually have the ability to impact in the short term and in the longer term? And in the longer term, in my mind, the scope blows way up. So in the short term, like I said, we're building a reporting structure that's manageable by a city administrator. We do want to get, and we can talk about this in a future meeting, we do want to get some just high level community feedback around that. Community had a lot of reasons for voting for charter change. Somebody made this comment earlier about some of the needs that people have expressed during the polling and during the engagement, and during the comment generation in the charter transition project. We want to hear that. We want to validate that. And then when we make some initial decisions about the high level reporting structure, that's when we get into the second deliverable of thinking bigger picture. So we're still evaluating what the plans are going to be there, but it's going to be a little bit different in that phase. I think you're referring to phase 2, which starts in January of 25.
Oh, is that when? Okay,
Well,
I
I'm
wasn't
not sure
paying
if
attention
we've-
exactly to the calendar years. I was assuming it was after October of this year.
Yeah, we got to clean up our phasing language. I think we got phase 2.
There
all
are
over
lots
the
of
place,
phases.
but-
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
Yes.
I think he's talking about the implementation, those
Of
pieces
like
that you're
bureau
talking
review,
about
that kind of
later.
thing.
So once we think about the technical alignment, the change management, and then the future ideas for change, that's going to be a different type of engagement and conversation that isn't specifically focused on structure. That's when someone might say, you know, hey, I've really had this longstanding problem that like I deliver a service, somebody in a different bureau delivers the same service, we don't do it the same way. It's frustrating for community because they get different levels of service. We don't know who's doing what in the other bureaus. That's not something that we're going to solve by moving program around, but that is something that we could solve by some process improvement or some standardization or some coordination, collaboration, reduction of silos. That's the type of thing that I think is going to be at least discussed as part of those sort of recommendations for the future elected leaders to take up. And, you know, we talk a lot about this in this phase, we call it off ramps right now. This is like, not all of this needs rebranding, to be honest, but we're going to pursue some of them if we have the sort of support and will to do that. And a lot of them are going to go into the form of recommendations for the future.
Can I say super quick, just because I heard you say community engagement, which we're not able to get to. We plan to go out to community starting June 5th with a survey. We plan to have a listening session on the 22nd of June. I just want you to know that so that you can work with your co-chairs and Julia to arrange a time for us to come back and talk about that specifically if you want to help kind of inform that particular strategy, which is what we were hoping to get to tonight. And I'm so sorry. Yeah.
I just have a quick question. When you're doing community engagement, is it just like website releases and on the socials, or is it like going to like community organizations like the league that we have tonight and also informing them to engage the people who have been engaged?
It is certainly a combination of whatever we have the capacity to do and whatever this body helps us identify as kind of like top priority. We do have a listening session, community-wide listening session scheduled for the 22nd. So we are definitely hoping to reach as many people as possible to bring into that space, but it's also survey, it's also, you know, social media engagement. There's a variety of things we're hoping to accomplish.
I'm afraid we have like 2 minutes left of the meeting. Julia, I know you've had your hand up. Is it something that you need to be able to share right now, or can we capture that?
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. Okay, I'll just pare it down to one comment. I agree with what Terry's saying about this is going to be essentially an interim situation, but I know just enough about change management to be dangerous. And so change management 101 is you have now and you have after, and in the middle you have the neutral zone, and it's known for its uncertainty and causing anxiety. And I think you've been getting at that when you're talking about building trust and transparency and attending to the feelings of your employees, I mean, that's amazing to me. So I think when you view it as a part of the change management process, that's a neutral zone, and you're going to convey that, you know, and you've conveyed that to us as a committee. We're not sure exactly what this is, how this whole process is going to be. We're going to work through it together. I think that's the right attitude. And it's not that you're not at the final product, you're just going to still be getting there even after we hit these dates. So I'll save the rest for another time. Thank you.
Thanks, Juliet. All right, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, nice work.
We have our next step slide real quick here, but before we talk about that, Julia, do you want to summarize the actions that we took tonight?
Yes, I will try, but with caveats of, I'm sure there's a lot of kind of to-dos that were in the chat that, you know, we'll go back and capture, but let me read what we've got so far. So one, and I think the co-chairs started with this, so they're working on revised versions of the foundational documents, and they've reached out to a couple committee members that have proposed changes, and you'll all get those new sets next week for you all to consider approving at our next meeting in early June. Future meeting minutes will better identify and highlight the action items from the meetings. If one of you has feedback that you want to give to the city or questions that you want to ask, email me and copy the co-chairs. Shoshana is going to check with procurement folks about sharing the transition related contracts with you all. Similarly, the co-chairs and I will work on finding kind of the right time to invite the change management consultant and future voter education consultant to GTAC meetings. I will resend this, but I sent it to you a while ago. It's also on the website, but Shoshana asked if folks want to offer any comments on the current iteration of the transition plan to send those to me by Monday. The co-chairs and I will always be meeting between meetings to kind of make sure that the upcoming schedule is making sense with the decision-making timelines that are happening at the city. I will distribute, once I get it, I guess, the employee and manager surveys, as well as the report on that engagement that Jamie talked to y'all about. We're going to figure out kind of what information you need when ahead of meetings, and maybe identifying on your meeting agendas, like here are your kind of the key documents that you need to read. We will consider doing work groups. At some point, we should talk about how we're going to do formal recommendations to city council when you have them. And then finally, I think what Jamie was just talking about getting your input on the upcoming engagement strategy in June around service delivery, or what we're going to call it in the future is service delivery. Thanks, Lori.
Okay, as far as other next steps, so last week we asked for volunteers to work with the staff on drafting the community engagement plan. Lots of folks volunteered, thank you. The first meeting will be the week of May 22nd with the goal of bringing the first draft of the community engagement plan to this committee by June 20th. Other folks are welcome to join too. Also, there was some interest in getting to know each other, that it might be easier to work together if we knew each other more than just a couple minutes here. So if anyone would like to volunteer to organize a social activity, let Dave or I know. We'd be happy to have somebody do that. And our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, June 6th, 6 to 8 p.m. I'm going to go to the next slide. We have the agenda, which, as we know, is subject to change. Let's see. At the next meeting right now, what we have scheduled is to get approval for our foundational documents. So you'll see those in the mail, and then we'll work with you offline to get any more comments on them, and we'll look at them for approval in the next meeting. We'll hear from the Independent District Commission and the Salary Commission on their work so far, and talk about how we can amplify their work and support their community engagement. And then finally, we'll provide input to the city's second progress report. And that's what's on the agenda for now. But like I said, we'll be talking about it to see if we need to make some changes. Also, all scheduled meetings are published on the committee's webpage if you need to take a look at it, so you can see the whole list of agenda topics. That's it. So I think meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Here.
David, I appreciate your.